Thank you for joining Dr. James Rini and I, the Curiosity Conduit, for a look behind the curtain of letting destiny deliver. Please feel free to add comments or ask questions below and make sure to subscribe and like. Dr. Rini or I will be happy to answer any questions you have. Today, we will learn what the 3 A's are and start the journey of the 10 pathways, a means to achieve self health. This conversation may lead to feelings of inspiration and curiosity, and it could also create some inner movement. That's all welcome. Life will reveal your destiny through all opportunities you keep yourself available for. So allow yourself to stay open, and let's see what destiny delivers. Your book lists the 3 A's as awareness, avoidance, and action. Today, we will discuss the first pathway, which falls under awareness. So, I just want to start with just the first one out of the 10 because this seems pretty important. And it says achieving an awareness of self that is able to overcome distortions in or blockages to self development created by misinformation, oppression, and not honoring yourself. So, why is this so important as being the first of the 10 pathways?
Well, having the awareness of self is akin to not being deaf, dumb, and blind. The self is the key. That is our genetic code. That is our destiny. And it's different for every one of us because each one of us are a different self. Not being able to tune into that self in order to actualize it, to act on what that self and where it's guiding you to, then creates mental unwellness, mental illness. Because again, it is the gyroscope. It is what drives us. It is who we're supposed to become. So in becoming the self, like I use this analogy in the book, that the sun is made of hot gases, the inner core, which by nature seek to expand. But gravity acts on the sun and makes it contract. So it's the opposing forces of expansion and contraction that give the sun its shape and form. Like when the sun runs out of gases, it implodes, because gravity then wins the battle, and it then becomes transformed into a black hole or something else. So here's my point. The self also has to deal with the ego. The ego is the part that wants to be popular and accepted and, be seen as wanted and desirable and all those things, and very aesthetically driven, okay, which is different than the self. The self is more the nature in us, okay? So what happens is we have to deal in real life. I mean, there's misinformation all the time. I saw this congressman once on the steps of the Capitol goes, "It's my constitutional right to give misinformation because of the freedom of speech." Just to use that as one example. Oppression, there's all kinds of oppression. I mean, throughout the decades and hundreds of years, people have had to overcome suppression, women, different ethnic groups, whatever. So these are forces that are impinging upon the self. And we can get confused, like my mother wanted me to have children. And I go, well, now, if I have children, is it because I want to have children, or is it because my mom wanted me to have children? I now can become confused as to why I'm having children. You know what I'm saying? I'm a male too. It might be different for a female, And really how I wanted to be.
Spiritually, isn't there something involved in that too?
I don't know. Hormonally, yes. For women, they get the hormones that makes them want to have babies. Men, not so much. Okay. They want to try to have practice making babies, but not making the baby. Okay, and we have to be tuned into that self in order to honor it and host it. If we don't honor it and host it, then we are sabotaging ourselves, to put it simply. And a lot of times it's hard to listen to it because it deviates from the norm, or it deviates from what's popular, or what everybody thinks. And the ego then tends to give into it. There's that famous song that's by Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. He, in that song, that person that's talking about hosting and honoring themselves, or they dance to the beat of a different drummer. And it's all unique. And it's that ability to embrace and honor that uniqueness without at the same time alienating the rest of the world around you. Okay. And that's where the opposing forces then come in there. That you have to have that attunement to self, but also be able to be attuned to others and then co-create from that mutual attunement.
For people listening, they may not understand some of that terminology there.
Well, thank you.
So
We're pointing that out.
can you please explain more like attunement or something like that for
Well, do you know when you're being listened to and heard? And do you know when you're not being listened to and heard? I'm asking you personally. Can you tell when someone's really listening to you and hearing you versus they're not hearing you, not getting what you're saying?
yes.
Okay. Well, that means that they are attuned to what you're saying. And that attunement is much more important. It's like if somebody who sings out of tune. Who wants somebody to sing out of tune? Who pays somebody to make records because they sing out of tune? Nobody. You know, in sixth grade, we had this play and we did a chorus. It was The Grapes of Wrath. And the girl next to me complained to the teacher that I was throwing her off key because I was singing out of tune. I'm tone deaf, you know? So the teacher told me, well, mouth it, you know? Just, lip sync it. And then I guess he felt like, that's really not the best thing. So he had me then draw the curtains, So he was a great teacher. I love that sensitivity. You see, he was very attuned to what I might internalize from that experience. And so he transformed that into a functional behavior, do the curtains, And in that play, I had one line. That's how low my self-esteem was. And the line was, I can't see, I remember it to this day. And the audience roared in laughter. I don't know why. I mean, I was just reciting the line. And he called me back to his desk one day. He goes, you really ought to take more lines in these plays. You have a funny voice. And then he heard how that could sound like, I have a Merkel voice, He goes, no, it's just your delivery essentially. And I knew what he meant, but I felt so great about how attuned he was to how it also could have been heard, you see. Because everything has a meta level. I can say, hey, you look great today. And you say, well, does that mean I look like crap all the rest of the time? You see, you help somebody out and they can say to you, oh, you think you're better than me. You see, because you don't know how they're going to interpret something. And everybody takes things in different meaning and what have you. So that's part of being attuned. How does that person understand what I'm saying? Which a lot of times is not exactly the way I'm hoping they're understanding me, goes off a little bit into their own way. In therapy, that's really helpful a lot of times because they hear me the way that's going to be helpful to them, not necessarily what I said. So that attunement is so important to self. And you're attuned to yourself by knowing what your wants are, your needs and your desires. And needs are not negotiable. Otherwise, they wouldn't be needs. You have to eat. You have to sleep. You have to drink water. Those things are not negotiable. Some of the other needs are negotiable because we don't die if we don't do them. But they're really not negotiable because a part of us does die if we don't meet that need for intimacy, for closeness, for being understood, for being kind. Those are kind of needs we have. They're higher level needs.
they die?
A part of us dies, yes.
Can it be like revived?
I don't know. I'm not very good at reincarnating people or reincarnating something that's dead. Dead is dead. Other languages have words that we don't have in English, so we can't conceptualize what they can conceptualize because we don't have that word. Like the word Gestalt, that means nothing to Americans. In German translation, it means the whole is greater than the sum total of its parts. Well, what does that mean? It means you can't, if you can't see the Gestalt, you can't see the forest for the trees. The forest is holistic. You see the bigger picture. If you can only see the trees, you're analyzing, and in analyzing, you only see parts.
Well, it goes right into this next quote. And I really love this. I love these couple of words here together. I really like it. It says, by having a dualistic sense of self. I love that dualistic sense of self. You will recognize that you have both a good side and a bad side. This dualism between good and bad creates within us a certain rhythm that must be kept in balance. It is better to see your dark side and work with it than to fear it, avoid or give into it or deny it. So, my question here is if one is scared of their dark side or believes their dark side would not be accepted in our society, what are options for these individuals on the 10 Pathways journey? So, what are some options there? Because there's a lot of people who are.
No, it is a universal struggle. So let me start off with a metaphor or analogy, both. Plants need both the light and darkness to carry on photosynthesis. If they don't have one or the other, they can't complete it. And that's part of like with your battery, it's got to be positive and negative. Both cables have to be attached to complete the circuit, and the brain really has circuits. So this dualism, we have a dualism because we have two brains. One is conscious, the other is unconscious. One's the ego, the other is the self.
Yes. I love that you said that because I want to challenge some verbiage you have here or just a singular word, bad side. I don't like that.
Okay, dark
'Cause
side, how's that?
it's different. You have these different
Yeah,
sides.
but it's dark because some people embrace it. Like Dahmer embraced his dark side. You see, he tried to fight it. I'm serious. He tried to fight it. And when he failed, he said to himself, I'm just a fruit on the tree of evil. So he embraced it, because at that time, his identity became that person, which was a symptomatic self. It wasn't his healthy self. It was his unhealthy self that, because the dark side took over. And if you repress the dark side, it takes over.
I can go with dark side, but it's not final for me.
Shadow is how the word Carl used.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much.
See what I'm saying?
That
About the
feels
light
better.
words and light.
That is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well-
Although it's still saying dark. However, I
Well,
am
there's
against
light
that.
and shadow, is there?
I'm against bad. It's just to me, it's different. You're saying dark shadow. That's fine.
Okay.
But there's some things within that's not necessarily bad. And if
I
like, and
agree with
who's
you.
saying that?
But let me say this to you. I think most people think of it as bad when it's theirs.
Okay, well, let's make them not
Like
think
they
that.
say something, go, I'm so bad. I'm not as bad as this makes me sound. I wish he were dead, or something like that, and they would never kill the person, but that's sometimes the only way they see out of a problem because they don't want to hurt them necessarily so they see it as bad within them and they are afraid of it because it is dark to them and it's parts of themselves that they think are horrible and they don't really want to know it. And here's what I would say to them if they really have that feeling is, because I had a client one time and he came in and he goes, okay, I'm here to look at my, my dark side, and he told me it's hell. And I said, I think you've already seen your dark side. What you're going to discover is your good side. And oh my God, he was amazing, the progress he made, the changes that he made in his life. Because he was expecting, he'd find these terrible things out about himself. No, he found out he had all this wonderful potential.
Yes, because anybody who is focused on their dark side, they're not looking at their light. So that's correct. That
Mhm.
would be correct.
Yeah.
And the light side, dark light, that just
But,
leaves
but these are things that he was taught to be. That's the thing, you see. And that's what I mean about the self versus the distortions and blockages that are created by the things that we're told by other people. And our parents in particular, or who raised us. I mean, they start out with a lie. Santa Claus is a lie. It's a very acceptable.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Hold on here. What do you
Santa Claus really does exist. That's what I mean. They come back and tell you he doesn't, and it really does.
It does. I'm opening presents every day right now.
Exactly.
So I don't know what you're talking about. All right. So I do like that. That's definitely something that one can do if they're afraid of their dark
So
side.
let me give you an example of a guy I saw on TV. He was a cat burglar, and he went straight. And what he did is he became a consultant on how not to be burglarized. So he took what was illegal and turned it into something that was legal. Same exact thing, but in one case he's helping people, in the other he's
Using his powers for good.
yeah. But it's that ability to make that shift, you see, and to identify. We have to take on a different identity there. Like people who are in the NFL, for example, and they don't play anymore. That's been their identity their whole life. And now they don't know who they are because that's not their identity anymore.
Yeah, I do like that, and you talk about, focusing on different things, but I would also make mention that it's important for somebody who doesn't like their or is afraid of their dark side, I would say at times, sometimes just let it rip. So you can make adjustments. You don't know what you have
It's not dark at all. You think
Yeah.
it's dark, but it's not.
And sometimes it is more accepted than you believe, and other people can identify with it. So to me, depending on what it is,
Well, what do you do with your rotten food? Do you leave it in the refrigerator or do you get rid of it?
okay, look, I know many people who leave it in there and it's absolutely disgusting. I can't do that.
But see, that's what happens in the psyche too.
Mhm.
That information begins to become rotten.
But
And rotten then becomes in the thoughts and in the toxicity that we need or become, and because it's turned rancid, it's not been, food only stays fresh for so long and then it turns rancid.
But if you let it out, let it out, let it rip, as I'm saying, let it out, there's no way for you to understand what adjustments you need to do or temper, how to temper if you
What
don't
can
let
lead to a
something.
transformation?
Okay.
That's letting it out. It's just cathartic. Cathartic is, they take the fluid out of your knee, but it's going to build back up again. So they're going to have to
Okay.
take it out over. It's just, we're transformative. You've actually become a different person. You'll see the world differently. You treat people differently. Like Ebenezer Scrooge, when he had the three spirits visit him, he became a totally different person the next day.
Well, and that's
That's a transformation, you see.
yes, transformation after he was releasing it, letting it out, letting it rip, and then understanding the
After he became aware of himself. See, what what the ghost did is they made him aware of his past, present, and future, you see.
show by showing his actions and how
By
they did.
repaying his life to them, yes.
Because of
And that's being self-reflective, if you think of, is that ability to self-reflect and see, okay, these are.
and this is true. And so now it's having me go to a different place of anybody who's afraid of their dark side, they've already let it out. They've seen it, right? So then they can reflect on that for their transformation.
Well, unfortunately, most people are driven much more by their defense mechanisms than there are their desire to integrate their dark side.
Well, and that's all within the ego as well, correct? The defense mechanism.
Well, some of them are unconscious too, to protect the ego.
Mm.
Like people who had traumatic experiences and have forgotten them. It's the ego. I mean, it's the unconscious protecting the ego because the conscious mind can't handle that information, you see. Now, when they turn 30 or 40, they might be able to handle that information. And so all of a sudden, that traumatic information comes into awareness, you see.
Because the maturity and what's happening with
Well, the unconscious feels like, okay, now you can handle that information. Like some parents tell the kid when they're 21, well, you were adopted, I think you can handle the information now.
I can see that. Okay. If you deny the dark side of your needs because you see them as wrong, you will undermine your decision making process by blocking the flow of information from the self into consciousness. This one will come from me years ago. And I think there's others that can definitely relate to this. And it comes from the sexual side. So there's a lot of people who feel like any type of deviant behavior or something that they're attracted to that's beyond a missionary style, right? That it's bad. And so they won't do it, but it's something that's within them. We're sexual beings, and you push it aside, and it just becomes larger and larger and larger. So, like,
Hmm. Well, see, I like to say it's the biological versus the social. As animals, we have biological needs, and the need for sex is biological, and it's also necessary for the perpetuation of the species. But society, and in particular Judeo-Christian society, sees sex as something that is for procreation only. And so to deviate from that is then giving into something that's sinful. It's the original sin. Sex is an evil thing.
so taking that and not giving into that and pretending that it's not there, what happens to the individuals?
Well, I can think of, situations where they were brought up and taught that sex was a bad thing and it's only for procreation, and then wreak havoc on that person's marriage because they couldn't make a healthy sexual judgment because of their belief system. And again, that's what I'm saying about misinformation and blockages and distortions that occur because of misinformation.
So when this happened and you are denying your dark side, it ends up just coming out in different ways within your life in large ways. Is that correct?
It is correct. Yes. Again, it turns rancid. It'll come out in ways that are self-defeating. People always say that they're self-defeating, but they're not self-defeating in the way that they think they're self-defeating. They're self-defeating because they're not attuned to self, or if they are, they're not hosting and honoring
And then
themselves properly.
and in some cases creating this like self-fulfilling prophecy of what they're afraid
It
of.
does create a self-fulfilling prophecy of what they're afraid of. Exactly what it does. Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the last quote, unless there's anything else you'd like to say on that.
Now we'll go to the last quote.
Families, schools, and other institutions have a tendency to block or distort self development by fostering overdependence on directions from external authorities. External authorities tend to make people one dimensional as they try to persuade us to identify with a fixed point or with one way of thinking. Our sense of self gets lost in trying to comply with these stereotypical attitudes and roles that we are supposed to display. As we get cut off from our true sense of self, we become mired down in feelings of inadequacy and fall into depression. Would a good example of this be the person who always feels like they don't fit in anywhere and make them feel sad?
That's you bit off a lot of there for people to chew on to go into that question.
Well, and
So let me speak to that first.
okay. I didn't want to, it's all important.
Well, and that's why I want to go back to each part rather than, just an example, because we have families, we have schools, and obviously we have institutions. And here we're saying that they block and distort self-development. And what does it mean that they foster overdependence and direction? It means that, they basically prescribe how we should live our life. I mean, whether it is a religious institution or a political institution or what society says is what we need to do. Part of the problem with that is that they're trying to do a one size fits all, which is contrary to individuality, which is then contrary to authenticity, which is then contrary to mental health. So people fail to recognize and understand what authenticity is and how they may lack that authenticity because we become much more egocentric, and that egocentricness feels like authenticity, but it's not. It's coming from a part of the mind that can't see the forest for the trees. Let's put it that way. But yet it thinks it sees the forest, but it can't see the forest because it only can see the trees. And so a one size fits all is contrary to human nature. And it's just a way to deal with a mass amount of people. It's a way of hurting us, so to speak, because how do you take billions of people and pay individual attention to them? So, becoming a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer, that's getting them to identify with a fixed point. And that isn't the self. One time I guess, I don't know what it was, but I signed my name, Dr. James Rini, and the person goes, "Doctor is not part of your name." It's not. It's part of my title, but I can over-identify with it, you see, and I don't, but you can, and that's the difference between the fixed point or a role or, a title we have and identifying with it as opposed to that being attuned to and sensing what the self is needing, and that's how it gets lost because we're complying with these stereotypical attitudes and roles that we have to play, and display in order to, fit into society.
So, or appearing like you're fitting in.
Or appear.
And so the individual
Good point.
who is believing that they see the forest, right?
Yeah.
But feels like they don't fit in anywhere and they're not happy. To me, it's everything that you just discussed as the reason why, as part of it at least, large part.
Well, I think an excellent point, and it rests on the idea that, again, we're all individuals and we're all different, and schools and society and institutions are telling you you're supposed to be like everybody else.
Exactly. And so what I like about this is that, and you said it in the beginning, is being able to achieve an awareness of self that's able to overcome, right? So I'm just going to stop the sentence of that, but you have to be able to integrate into society. We're not saying, oh, these things are not good in society, so get up and leave. No, you're here. We're going to live in it, but learning how to be yourself
No,
in it.
it's not all bad what families and schools and institutions, are helping us learn and patterning us in form of development. It's the rigidity that comes with it that becomes a problem. We become over identified with that thing. Okay.
That's good. I like that. Thank you for joining Dr. Rini and I on this journey behind the curtain of letting destiny deliver. Join us next time as we will learn about the second pathway under awareness, contributing to the means of achieving self health and development. Remember, questions or comments are welcome below. Now ask yourself, what part of your life might destiny be trying to speak through right now? Keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, destiny isn't something you chase, it's something you allow. Until next time, be well.